Hello and welcome to the GCSE Biology tutorial for topic B6 Inheritance, Variation and Evolution. This tutorial covers part 2 Genetic Inheritance and looks at genetic diagrams, inherited disorders and the work of Gregor Mendel. Starting off with, we can use genetic diagrams to explain how sex is inherited. In other words, what determines whether a baby will be male or female. Well, this is down to the 23rd pair of chromosomes in the body cells. These are either XX, which means a person would be female, or XY, which means a person would be male. Now, what actually determines what is passed on? In terms of inheritance, in humans, it's down to the sex cells, the sperm and the eggs. Now remember, sperm and eggs are gametes, which means they are haploid. They carry half the number of chromosomes. So they don't carry pairs of chromosomes, they just carry 23 chromosomes. And a female's eggs, all of the eggs carry the X chromosome. Whereas in the father's sperm, 50% of the sperm will carry an X chromosome, but 50% of the sperm will carry a Y chromosome. If you look at this diagram here, if this sperm and this egg join together, then the baby would be XX, which means the baby would be female. However, if the sperm carries a Y chromosome and joins with an egg from the mother, which carries the X chromosome, the baby will be XY, which means the baby will be male. So there's a 50-50 chance of a baby being male or female, and it's actually down to the chromosome the sperm is carrying. To understand genetics, we need to look more closely at some certain key words. Now, we've mentioned genes before. They're sections of DNA, and a different version of a gene is called an allele. And there are two alleles for every gene, one from each chromosome in a pair. And alleles can be dominant or recessive. If both the alleles for a gene are the same, the term is homozygous. If the alleles are different, it's heterozygous. In the case of dominant alleles, only one of them needs to be present to express this gene. With recessive alleles, both of them need to be recessive to express the gene. We can use genetic diagrams to show this in a little bit more detail. These diagrams are called Punnett squares, and when we use genetic diagrams, we use letters to represent the alleles. So a capital letter represents a dominant allele, and a small letter represents a recessive allele. In this example here, we have the mother who is dominant and homozygous because both alleles are the same, and the father who has two different alleles who is said to be heterozygous. Now, what they pass on is random, but can be determined from this diagram here. So let's choose a gene just to use as an example. Let's pretend that a large capital F stands for brown eyes, which is dominant, and a small f stands for blue eyes. So the mother would have brown eyes. The father has brown eyes, but he is carrying the blue-eyed allele there. But he actually has brown eyes because remember, if you have the dominant allele, then that's what you will show. You will have brown eyes even though you have a recessive allele as well. Now in this case here, all of the offspring will actually have brown eyes because they're all going to have the large dominant capital F. Now there is a chance that the father will pass on the recessive smaller allele here, but this means because they've still got the dominant allele, they'll still have brown eyes, but they will carry the blue-eyed allele. In this diagram here, both parents are heterozygous, so there is a 1 in 4 chance of the child actually getting both recessive alleles and expressing that. So 1 in 4 chance of having blue eyes if both parents are heterozygous, which explains why a child might have blue eyes when both parents have brown eyes. They may actually be carrying the blue-eyed allele. Here's another genetic diagram to show this. This is with a plant as an example, and the large F is dominant and stands for red flower colour, and the little f is recessive. It stands for white flower colour. If both parents are heterozygous, you can see that the possible outcome is 2 large Fs, which means red flowers. There's a 50% chance of a large F, little f being passed on, so an allele from parent 1 and an allele from parent 2. In this case, they would still have red flowers, but they would be carrying the white flowered allele here, but they would have red flowers. And there's a 1 in 4 chance of the 2 recessive alleles coming together and the flower being white. We use the terms genotype to say what the genes would be and the phenotype to what they would actually look like. Sometimes disorders can be genetic, which means they are passed on in the genes. An example of this is cystic fibrosis. Now that causes the lungs to form a lot more mucus and affects breathing and your digestive system, and it does reduce life expectancy. Cystic fibrosis, or CF, is caused by a recessive allele. So let's pretend that is the small f in this case. And 1 in 25 people have this allele. If you have a copy of this allele, you won't actually suffer from cystic fibrosis, but you will be a carrier, which means that you could then pass it on to your children, but you won't suffer from the disease. What are the chances of passing it on? Well, if you are a carrier, as shown here, and you have a child with another carrier, there is a 1 in 4 chance of the 2 recessive alleles coming together and the child having cystic fibrosis. There is a 50% chance of the child being a carrier themselves, and there is a 1 in 4 chance of the child being normal and having no cystic fibrosis genes. Another example of an inherited disorder is polydactyl. Polydactyl is also genetic and causes extra fingers and toes. It's not life-threatening, and it's caused by a dominant allele this time. This means it can be inherited if only one parent carries it. So if one parent does carry the gene, there is a 50% chance of the child also having it, as shown in this diagram here. You can also use family trees to show how genetics and disorders can be inherited. And as you can see here, the key codes for the different things that are passed on, and you can use it to figure out if someone is a carrier or if they've been passed on a certain disease. Sometimes it looks as if a disease is not in a certain generation, and you can see if it's been passed on, that means that there's carriers in the family. Genetic disorders can be screened for in embryos during IVF, although this does cause some concerns. The reasons for it would reduce the suffering of those with genetic disorders, and another reason is it's not used to check for things like gender, it's only used for genetic issues. The reasons against it is people do feel that it's prejudiced against those with genetic disorders and would lead to people destroying embryos because they carry a genetic disease. It's also expensive, and the concern is it can be taken too far and people would start to select other things, not just whether a child has a genetic disease. Genetic disorders can also be treated using gene therapy. They can't be cured, but an idea using gene therapy is taking the normal allele and then placing it into the cells of the person with the genetic disorder. Now the issue is as soon as that person produces new cells, that will have the faulty gene. So it's not going to cure it, but it could help treat and support people with genetic disorders. You also need to know about Gregor Mendel. Now, Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk who studied genetics in the 19th century, and he actually became known as the father of genetics. He studied plants, mainly pea plants, and noticed when he bred them together, they passed on certain characteristics. He took a tall pea plant and a dwarf pea plant, and when he crossed them together, he noticed that all of them were tall. So at first he thought, oh, the dwarf pea plants have disappeared. But when he bred the first offspring together, the dwarf pea plants came back. So he realised that there must be things that are passed on, things that are stronger and things that are weaker. You can see that from the diagram here. So he actually determined that there are hereditary units. We call them now genes, but he didn't know about genes then. And he concluded that these are passed on from parents and they can be dominant or recessive. So In this diagram here, he realised that tall was dominant over dwarf, which was recessive. Now, all of this work came before people knew about genes and DNA, and like many scientists, he became much more significant after his death. Later on, studies supported his work, for example, studies on cell division, on the work of chromosomes, and the discovery of DNA in 1953. Here's some questions about this topic if you pause and try these for 10 minutes. Okay, what are alleles? They are different versions of genes. They can be dominant or recessive, and there are 2 alleles for every gene. How is cystic fibrosis passed on? Well, it's a genetic disorder and it's recessive, so it's passed on by the recessive allele. And it can be passed on by people suffering from cystic fibrosis or from carriers. There's a 1 in 4 chance of a child getting cystic fibrosis if both parents are carriers. What are the concerns of genetic screening of embryos? It can be viewed as unethical because you would be destroying an embryo if it carried a genetic disorder. It's expensive, and the concern is it can be taken too far in selecting genes in embryos. What did Gregor Mendel do? He bred together plants and looked at characteristics that were passed on. He concluded that these units, which we call genes, can be passed on a dominant or recessive. In summary, we've looked at genetic diagrams, inherited disorders, and the work of Gregor Mendel. Thank you.